and I get to do the next induction. And I got to tell you a story. Those of you who know me that every once in a while I come up with a story. And when I was a kid, I had a wooden board. And the reason I had a wooden board was because my dad was one of those guys, you don't buy something, you have to make it, okay? And he said, I'll make you a surfboard, but you have to get a set of plans. We were in California. And we had all these boards at Malibu, right? And this was about 1959. And there was about 1960, actually, because they were foam board. And he says, if you got to get a set of plans. Well, the only plans I could find was a 1939 edition of Popular Science magazine. And we made the Tom Blake paddleboard. The plans called for it to be 13 feet 9 inches long, but he decided that since I was a young kid and only weighed 110 pounds, that was a little too long for me. So in the plans, he cut 2 feet out of the middle, and so it was 11.9, and then he drilled extra big holes in the ribs to make it light. It was only 70 pounds instead of the usual 90 to 100 pounds. So I actually had the first short, lightweight, high-performance board on the East Coast. And I drug that thing down to the beach, and my mom wouldn't let me go surfing alone. But I found out that about a mile down the road from where we lived was a place called the Surf Club. And Mike Howes, our next inductee, he had a motel there at the Surf Club. He had a beach there, and guys surfed out there. I found that guys would surf out there all the time, not just on weekends. And so she would drive me down there in our Plymouth station wagon, and I had this big wooden board I'd drag out there. And Mike also had a wooden board, and so did most of the other guys who surfed down there, still had the wooden boards. And then, well, I remember standing on the beach with Mike one day. I just come out of the water, and here's a guy out there on a foam board. Now, the foam boards, they called them California boards, right, Mike? And the wooden boards were called Hawaiian boards. I don't know why, that's just what they called them. So a guy took off on a wave, and as he took off on this wave and he dropped into a crouch, he was riding a foam board, and Mike said, see that? You get one of those California boards that blows your whole style. Don't ever get one of those California boards. He started surfing when, Mike? In 1937? 1937 in New Jersey. And and during the 60s, in the surfing contest, Mike was the head judge of the Atlantic States contest up there, and he was a great contributor to the sport of surfing in all those years. And tonight it's my pleasure to induct Mike Howes into the East Coast Surfing Hall of Fame. Mike, come on up.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Well, you know, I'm getting kind of being old fart here. Now, I look out there and I see a few bald heads and some gray hair, but not a lot. And I think back to when we first started, it was a little bit different than it is now. When I first got into surfing, it was all the fault of Tom Blake and Duke Hanamoko. They came to Atlantic City one time, I think it was in '37, they gave a demonstration to Steel Pier. And Stretch Pole, who I think he's being inducted tonight too, isn't he? Stretch Pole and I went down there to see his demonstration. And we saw that and he said, well, that's what we're going to do. So we went home and we started to build surfboards. And it was somewhat on the plan of Tom Blake's boards, but modified a bit for what we thought would be better for East Coast. And we first started surfing the big boards in the early fall of '37. My board, my original board, the Malolo, was 12.5 feet long, weighed 120 pounds. Now I weighed 130 pounds. Now if you saw the first clip of the movies they're movies that I took back then, you saw me, I was a skinny one. You saw me lifting that surfboard around and surfing that, and we had a real grand time. And around us began to collect a few other people into surfing. I remember, of course, Stretch Pole and I started out together, and Bobby Hensler, he's a great big 6-foot guy. And I'm trying to think of a couple other names now. No, I'm getting old enough that names begin to escape me. But anyway, it grew. And then we moved up to Ortley Beach, and then all these young characters start coming around getting their surfboards. And we built many, many surfboards. As a matter of fact, I had a little surfboard company myself. I built about 75, 80 boards, and I sold them mostly to camps for lifeguarding purposes and for patrolling swimming areas. They weren't really used very much for surfboards, except for a few of us there on the shore. And there were no such things in those days as contests. We had no idea what a contest was. Our idea of the way to surf is to find a nice rolling wave with no white water on it and stand up there just nice and straight and pure as you could be and ride as far as we could right to the beach and step off in the sand. That was a great ride. I don't think they know how to do that anymore. But this came to me as a real surprise when Cecil called me a couple of months ago and said that they're going to induct me in the Hall of Fame. And I said, well, that's a pretty surprising and wonderful thing. I was kind of flabbergasted because it was just...
You're the best. You're the best.
a little hard to accept.
I got a couple more, guys. A couple more.
Matter of fact, get me wound up, we might be here all night. But when some of you first came in here, you saw that first clip on the screen up there, the movies, and you saw the surfers back in those days, and you understand the kind of waves that we were riding. And it was, to me, just so wonderful when the new boards came along, the little fancy boards that didn't weigh anything, and you could flip around and do all kinds of tricks on them, and that was just great. But it wasn't for me. I just couldn't do it. And I finally had to stop surfing about 1965, 1966. That was the end of my surfing days because I couldn't do those tricks anymore. But some wonderful things have happened. My son is a surfer. He was East Coast Junior Champion at one time. My grandson, 5 years old, was in his first surfing contest this past summer. So we got 3 generations going. Now something else that's kind of important to mention too for me. If you saw that clip, you saw a very beautiful young redhead. But she was a very good surfer's wife. When a surfer's up, nothing else counted. The whole family went surfing, and she stayed home. So thank you very much for putting up with us, Ma, for all these years. And we had another surfer in the family. My daughter Colleen was a surfer. She's a doctor now and doing some pretty wonderful things. So, thank you very much, and I appreciate your attention and putting up with me.